Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving straight into the incredible life of a real 19th century powerhouse, Hasseltine Judson. She was one of America's very first overseas female missionaries. We're going to examine the historical source material detailing her journey, the unbelievable sacrifices she made, and how her intense daily work absolutely shaped the modern global missionary movement as we know it.
But before we get into the history of it all, I want to ask you a question to really set the stage here. Would you leave everything behind forever? Literally everything. Well, in the early 1800s, when Anne decided to marry a young minister named Adoniram Judson and move to Asia, that is exactly the reality she faced. It meant willingly leaving her family, her home, her comfort, knowing for a fact she would almost certainly never see them again. It's a heavy weight, right? It's honestly kind of hard to imagine carrying that today.
Section 1. A Pioneer's Radical Calling. So to really understand her journey, we have to look at the stark contrast of her early life. Born in December 1789 in Bradford, Massachusetts, Anne grew up in a really comfortable environment. She had an unusually excellent education for a young woman of that era. But then, after a deep teenage spiritual awakening, her entire trajectory shifted. In February 1812, she married Adoniram, and just days later, they were on a ship departing for India. At a time when most women rarely traveled beyond their own home state, this was an absolutely unprecedented pivot. Section 2. Setting sail for the unknown.
Now, their perilous ocean voyage led to a massive risk. See, they were originally sponsored by the American Board of Commissioners. But the Judsons spent that long, isolating voyage doing careful Bible study, and their theological views actually shifted to align with the Baptist tradition. By getting baptized upon arriving in India, they forfeited their secure financial sponsorship. It was a huge leap of faith. They essentially pulled the plug on their own funding and had to rely entirely on a brand new network of American Baptist churches.
Section 3. Building Bridges in Burma. Once they settled in Yangon, which was then called Rangoon, Anne's insane work ethic became the absolute foundation of their mission. Rather than isolating herself, she threw herself entirely into learning the complex Burmese language and studying local customs. By teaching women and children, translating texts, and welcoming visitors, she became their primary communicator. Her ability to build these cultural bridges, that was a critical tactical advantage that kept their mission afloat.
But you know, that relentless work came with a severe cost. The historical records detail a life just plagued by malaria, total physical exhaustion, and chronic financial instability. And on top of that, they faced the devastating, heartbreaking loss of their children. When you stack all this up, the physical, the emotional, and the political toll, it highlights a level of resilience that is just incredibly difficult for most of us to even comprehend today.
Section 4. The Ultimate Test of Courage. This brings us to 1824, where the story violently shifts from daily missionary work to a desperate life-or-death fight for survival. The First Anglo-Burmese War broke out. The authorities grew deeply suspicious of all foreigners, basically assuming they were spies. And in the terrifying chaos of it all, Adoniram was suddenly arrested.
17. I just want you to sit with that number for a second. For nearly 17 whole months, Adoniram was locked up in the notorious Let Ma Yun prison under agonizing, brutal conditions. And for Anne, isolated in an active war zone, it meant navigating almost a year and a half of sheer terror and uncertainty.
But Anne didn't just sit around waiting in fear. She became the mission's tactical lifeline. She relentlessly petitioned government and prison authorities. She operated in secret to smuggle food and medicine into the prison to keep her husband alive. And she successfully safeguarded their irreplaceable translated manuscripts from destruction. Oh, and by the way, she orchestrated all of this while caring for a newborn infant. The historical accounts frequently highlight her extraordinary courage here. She walked grueling distances to visit the prison, often while she was seriously ill herself, navigating threats and severe physical weakness. Her persistence actually earned her the begrudging respect of some Burmese officials. It's a huge testament to how sheer determination can command authority, even in the most hostile environments imaginable. Section 5. An Enduring Global Legacy. So, what does this all mean? How did all this immense suffering translate into an enduring legacy? Well, it happened through the written word. Her book, An Account of the American Baptist Mission to the Burman Empire, acted as a massively powerful piece of media in the 1800s. Her vivid, unvarnished descriptions of Burmese culture and their missionary struggles essentially went viral for its time. It completely mobilized American Christians to fund and join global missions.
Tragically, the years of physical and emotional strain ultimately took their toll. Anne Judson passed away from exhaustion in Amherst on October 24, 1826. She was only 36 years old. Her daughter Maria died just months later. But even though her life was short, historical consensus recognizes her today not just as a supporting spouse, but as a foundational architect of the modern missionary movement. Let's actually hear from Anne herself, because looking at her own journals gives us incredible insight into her mindset. She wrote, "I feel willing and expect, if nothing in Providence prevents, to spend my days in this heathen land." This entry shows she had fully calculated and accepted the permanent nature of her departure before she even stepped foot on the boat. Later, when facing terrible illness and her husband's imprisonment, she wrote, "The love of Christ can sustain us through every trial." Regardless of your personal beliefs, the source texts make it crystal clear that this theological conviction was the psychological anchor that allowed her to survive conditions that would have absolutely broken most people. Finally, she noted, "Our trials are not worthy to be compared with the glory that shall be revealed." This biblical worldview allowed her to reframe immense personal tragedy into a much broader, meaningful narrative. Which leaves us with a final thought to consider today. How can a single, short life manage to echo across centuries? Anne Judson's story, drawn directly from these historical records, suggests that global legacies aren't always built in moments of glory. Often, they're built through grueling, daily perseverance in the dark. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this analysis leaves you curious to explore the source texts for yourself.